Professor Ahmet T Kuru is one of the finest authors on Islam and Muslims in the contemporary world.
About a decade I spent 50 Muslim majority countries today, why they have authoritarianism and underdevelopment problem. I was not expecting the book would have such an influence. So far we have about 15 translations. An Indian translation is very important for me because of the significance of India. I do not deny the destructive legacy of colonization. That the blaming others, looking only for foreign factors, cover up your internal problem.
In his book, Islam, Authoritarianism and Underdevelopment, he gives us an interesting perspective on why Muslims are perceived to be illiberal, and also why their horizons of knowledge have been narrowed down to theology and jurisprudence alone, which has led to their overall backwardness. Professor Kuru is in New Delhi to launch the Hindi edition of his book. The book has been published by Khusro Foundation. We take this opportunity to understand from him his research, which he carried out over a period of almost 10 years. Welcome to Awaz the Voice, Professor Kuru, and Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. I'm very happy to be in your beautiful country.
We have been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. And let's begin by your brief introduction to our viewers. Since you're in India for the first time, if you could share your journey as a scholar in political science and Islamic studies.
So let me begin with saying that I am very happy to meet you in person, Mr. Atir Khan.
Likewise.
You and I and Shah Faisal had a wonderful interview about the book and the Muslim world and the future of it 2 years ago. And many people watch it, and then I got very good feedback. So finally we have a live interview, which is important at the age of internet. Still in-person meetings matter.
Wonderful.
So the background is that my first book was on secularism in the United States, France, and Turkey. Very good reception in both English, Turkish, and Arabic translation, but people said that in Islam, secularism is impossible. How did you write such a book comparing with America and France? And my reply was that Christianity was no different historically. Every religion has multiple interpretations from history to present. And in Islam, there is a strong tradition of religion-state separation. Then when I kept receiving questions again and again, and finally, as you said, about a decade I spent 50 Muslim majority countries today, why they have authoritarianism and underdevelopment problem, despite their golden age, when from 8th to 12th centuries, Muslim societies learn paper making from China, mathematics from India, certain cultivation from Africa, and philosophy from ancient Greece, and then taught all of them to Europe. How come such a vibrant civilization today end up in multiple crises? Then even my American colleague says, look, everywhere is in crisis. In America we have Trump, Europe has a crisis. I said, yes, that's true. But as a Muslim myself, I want to write about this topic. Why don't you others write about European crisis, American crisis?
Sure.
So this is the background of the book.
Professor Kuru, your book has ignited a fresh debate. You say that Western colonialization is not the sole reason for the backwardness of Muslims in the world. Could you explain your thesis?
Thank you. I think there are two important points in your question. First of all, I was not expecting the book would have such an influence because I'm a humble academic, wrote a book. Yes, of course, the topic is interesting. But the way people, both academia and non-academic audience, received the book really encouraged me about the importance of social scientific analysis. So far, we have about 15 translations. An Indian translation is very important for me because of the significance of India. We have about 200 reviews of 25 languages. So that's the impact. And when I think about the attention people paid to the research is that the book argues that the problems in Muslim societies neither about Islam nor colonization directly. So we talk about Islam, but since you rightly focus on the issue of colonization, let me briefly explain why I am arguing this way. I do not deny the destructive legacy of colonization. So every occupation creates some problems. So I have an Ottoman background, but Ottomans occupy certain countries. Do I deny their negative legacies? No, every country has some negative and positive things in their history. When it comes to Western colonization, of course, this is the mass level imperialist project human beings ever seen.
Yes.
And in the Muslim world, except Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iran, almost all countries have been colonized by mostly European powers. This is important. I explained that how slavery, exploitation, they're all problems in India and elsewhere, Western imperialism. But the reason why I'm asking Muslim societies not to focus on that is that the blaming others, looking only for foreign factors, cover up your internal problems, starting myself as an individual, then my family, my neighborhood, my society, then my country.
Right.
I try to fix the problems. And Muslim societies have certain ideological problems, like radical interpretations of Islam, certain Islamist cliches we have to face. And from history to present, if we solve those problems, we'll be more successful. We'll produce more scientists, we'll have richer merchant class, and eventually we will contribute to the world in general or to the societies we live in. I live in America as a Muslim minority, but I want to contribute to American society.
Right.
When I contribute as a Muslim, I also contribute to my Muslim community at large. So that's one of the reasons why I emphasize that Muslims should focus on their internal issues rather than simply blaming colonizers for every problem.
Very interesting. Professor Kuru, you have also stated that the Muslims' inability to distinguish between religion and politics has been a major setback for them. And, this is one of the reasons why Islam is, assumed to be incompatible with democracy, which has some substance when you look at examples like Pakistan and Bangladesh, what's happening there. But in your book, you have clearly mentioned that there is no authentic reference in the holy books which say that the two need to be mixed. The religion and politics have to be mixed. Now, this has been happening largely because of the Muslim traditions and some far-fetched references. And that's why we have a system which we have today. Could you comment on that, please?
Yes, so the topic of state-Islam relations was a major discussion in the United States after 9/11.
Right.
And many scholars and even non-academics at the time were blaming Islam because of what happened on the destruction of terrorist attacks on the day of 9/11. And they were saying that there is no separation of religion and state, referring to famous scholars Bernard Lewis, Samuel Huntington. And I was thinking about it. That encouraged me to do research. And then I see that both the critics of Islam and the Islamists, they agree on this idea that Christianity endorses religion-state relations, whereas Islam prohibits that. So first of all, it's interesting that the two camps seems to be opposite of each other, Islam critics and Islamists, but they have many agreements on this issue. Another important point is that the more I study, the more I realize that the whole notion of caliphate, Islam state emergence, mostly depend on the writings of some 11th to 13th century scholars. Ghazali, his book Al-Iqtisad fil I'tiqad, which is moderation in faith. Mawardi, Ahkam Sultaniye, his book, which means the principles of governance. And Ibn Taymiyyah, Siyaset-i Shari'i,
Yes.
which means the Sharia-based politics. And these books are interpretations of the authors of their contexts, rather than, as you said, the Quran or the Hadith, Muslims' two sacred texts. And to make the long story short, when I look at the Quran, there is only one phrase asking Muslims to obey experts. It says, Ulul Amr minkum. Minkum means among you, and Ulul Amr generally is a broad concept interpreted as experts, authority. But Ibn Taymiyyah and similar like him, they give a very concrete meaning of obey ulama and the state authorities. Although the verse or any part of the Quran does not refer to either ulama as a class or the state as an institution. Then if there is nothing in the Quran, what about hadith? And then again, I saw Bernard Lewis's books that he said in Islam, there is a reported hadith, and others also keep referring. It says, religion and state are twins. Religion is the foundation, state is the guardian. That without foundation collapses, that without guardian perishes. But with a deeper analysis, it is clearly documented that this is a maxim of King Ardashir of Sasani Empire, who lived 300 years before Prophet ﷺ. Later on, after the 11th century, when the ulama, the scholars of Islam, with an orthodox mentality, either Sunni or Shia, they wanted to justify and legitimize religion, state, monopoly, power. They referred this fabrication as if it is the hadith. In fact, it is not. And then when I look at numerically, the studies show that from 800 to 1050, the golden age of Islam, the 3 centuries where Muslims are very productive in science and economy, out of 4,000 scholars of Islam at the time, only 9% except to engage with state, receiving public money, being prosecutor, judge, qadi,
Very interesting.
where 91% had multiple professions, from being a textile worker, a rich merchant, a porter carrying things, or having a barber shop. So they were part of life as a privately funded person, but at the same time study hadith, study fiqh, Islamic law, and the Prophet's reports, hadiths.
Right.
That's numerical. And then last but not least, when we look at the anecdotes of major Islamic figures, Abu Hanifa, the founder of Hanafi school, and I think many Muslims in India follow Hanafi school.
Yes, of course.
He refused to be qadi. And Abbasi Caliph, the political authority of the time, forced him to be qadi and say, give me a reason. And Abu Hanifa said, I'm not qualified. And then Abbasi leader became angrier. You are a liar. You are the most qualified. And Abu Hanifa paid the price by being imprisoned.
Yes.
Then poisoned to death.
Yes.
Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Ahmed bin Hanbal, they always put a distance. It showed that it is perfectly possible to have an understanding of Islam, about civil society, about personal life, without having a political project.
Well then, Professor Kuru, now that there has been a setback because of the system which has been prevalent, what's the way forward? How do we move forward? It appears to be an impossible project to make a distinction between the two in the Muslim world. What are your views on that?
In fact, it was also very, very difficult in Christian world. When we look at the world history, religion and politics as two sources of worldviews, power, they are very much appealing to come together to dominate. From ancient Egypt to certain aspects of Roman Empire, you see always politics and religion combining to produce more power. And in the Christian world, until the 11th century, the Holy Roman emperors were appointing popes and cardinals. But in the 11th century, Pope Gregory, as a revolutionary idea, said that we, the College of Cardinals, will elect the Pope without intervention of the monarch. Monarch never said that, oh, this is, in Christianity there is separation, I should tolerate. No, he brought an army, go to kill or imprison the Pope. But for various reasons, they fight 70 years. Nobody defeat the other, and the separation emerged as a historical thing. So it is not essential difference between Christian and Islam. No, in both religious history, there are ambitious people who try to bring these two together. In Christian world, because of various historical reasons, separation started. In France, for example, until 1905, Church refused the separation. But 1905, finally, they are separated. In the Muslim world too, this issue is political, historical. It is not part of the essence of religion. So replying to your question, this is a big challenge for every religion, even America today.
Yes.
Evangelicals and Trump trying to have a partnership.
Yes.
So we have to accept the difficulty. But when we know Islamic history, especially from 8th to 12th centuries, this gives us a new perspective.
Right.
Things are not like simple as said Hassan al-Banna or other Islamist ideologues. No, Islamic history, Islam are much more complex, and we have to accept the diversity and having an open conversation on this.
Professor Kuru, there is also this perspective that Muslims largely refer to the 7th century, especially in terms of Sunnah. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had the dual responsibility. He was also a statesman, and then he also had the religious duties. So, when seen from that perspective, how do we negotiate, or how do we, how do we tackle this important aspect?
This is a very important question because in minds of many Muslims, this comes again and again. Let me start from the Christian experience again. We Americans and Europeans, inspired by John Locke, a British thinker, in the famous letter of toleration, he said religion and state should be divided because many reasons, but especially we do not have a prophet among us. So the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam was a special person, unique.
Right.
He received revelation from God, and he was the leader of a small community where he knows everyone personally. Therefore, his example on this is unique but not to be repeated. There are many aspects of Prophet's life should be taken unique and not to repeat by us, like his being messenger of God and the way he played the leadership, receiving Quran on the minute details of the community.
Yes.
He ruled.
Yes.
Today, two things are different. One, no prophet among us, nobody received revelation. Two, politics is now run by state as an impersonal institution.
Right.
Rulers do not know the people they rule personally.
Right.
So therefore, this has institutions of judiciary, military, police, and others. So therefore, things are completely different on these two issues. Another dimension of this question is that when people were, Prophet ﷺ were dying, well, he was dying, he knew he was sick, and it is a process taking him, but he did not appoint a successor.
Yes.
This is what Sunnis and Shias kept debating, because Prophet makes some references to Ali, But he also led Abu Bakr to lead the prayer. But he never said that after me, this person should be your leader. That's why people of Medina, when he heard the Prophet die, gathered to choose one of their leaders as the leader of Medina.
Right.
This showed that the Prophet did not have a political message.
Right.
He did not leave a political project. If he had a political position, he would have said something. What would happen after him?
Right.
But he basically says that Islam is a religion with moral principles. There is Quran, and then his way of Sunnah. Muslims are supposed to follow. So that's what I understand. And the 7th century Prophet's unique way of combining to some extent religion and some communitarian leadership cannot be repeated today with the modern state without Prophet.
That is, of course, a very special, exception which we must respect. But now, do you agree that Muslims would have been better off if they considered Islamic concepts and ideas as dynamic and not eternal?
Definitely. First of all, as you refer to 7th century, even after Prophet ﷺ, what we saw is that all the attempts to do politics from a religious point of view create many civil wars.
Right.
The assassination of caliphate, then the Jamal War, the Siffin War, Muslims kill each other. In fact, that's the beginning of my analysis, because after Karbala, the murder of Prophet Grand's son Hussein, these traumas made many Islamic scholars believe that politics is corrupt, politicians have their own way, and the ulama should have an independent way.
Right.
And Islam came to us from more private, personal efforts of the scholars. Going back to today, directly you are asking, and my answer is why? Yes, why? First of all, in this word, technology, science, globalize, humanity, and then meritocracy all around the world matters. Look at the communities. For example, Jewish community in America. They are successful. They produce scientists. They produce important bourgeois people.
Yes.
And Muslims now in America started to imitate that model. Muslims now, overall, Muslims in America have higher income and education level than Muslims in Europe. And then Muslims now eventually becoming more influential in American society and politics because of their scientific and economic achievements. So Islam, in a way, that create a platform, as you said, with moral principles and the importance of honesty, trust, and then hardworking. Once Muslims become successful on science and economy and other institutions, of course they will automatically have some political impact. But some young people, some Islamists, they have a utopian view that if we attack on the political arena, we'll be shaping the world. No, things are not that simple. Even in international affairs, United States today is a superpower. How did it become? First, America opened universities, solved its school problems, established technological fabrications. At the time, it was a minor player in world politics.
Yes.
Europeans were the major. But when America built its economy science, automatically it became a military superpower.
And would you agree that we give an impression that the best of Islam is over? We always like to live in the past and not, sort of. And also, by the way, in your book, you have been critical of ulemas at places where you say that they restrict ijtihad. When it comes to young scholars, they are not given the scope and opportunity to do ijtihad in the manner they could have been.
Oh, very important two questions. First of all, I strongly disagree with the idea that everything good in Islam is in history. It's a very problematic idea, make us lazy and just thinking that, oh, we can never be good people, productive, good Muslims, etc. This idea to stuck in history, living in history, make us unsuccessful. But if we believe that Allah create everyone equal, we have opportunities, and we will be judged in the hereafter about the efforts, because the Quran says, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ وَلَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى, which means for human beings, there is only the efforts they put in as the rewards they will receive. So, but for some reason, Muslim societies have been taught that historical figures are important. For example, when you and I talk, people listen, they say Ahmed of America from 2025. He is not important.
Yes.
But if you quote me as Ibn Ahmed of 11th century, said that religion state separation possible, millions would follow it.
Yes. Or Ibn Taymiyyah, for instance.
Oh,
Yeah.
then 10 million.
Yes. Now, also that Muslims worldwide, we have seen, are more concerned with their identity rather than the scope of their faith and religion. The role of human actors becomes very important in interpreting religion. Would you agree? And there are various medieval perspectives or practices which contradict the notion of peaceful living in the modern world. What are your comments? How do we reconcile the two?
So dynamism, I think, is an important principle that we almost lost because of the idea of conservatism. I had a friend in Islamic studies, and he said that he is a part of network of ulama, and I taught them in your WhatsApp messages, ask them what they are planning to produce. And then he automatically say, they would say they would conserve. I said, but conserving for a millennium without putting? But there is a hadith saying that if 2 of your days are the same, you are loser. So every day you should have some progress. And the Quran says that Allah Jalla Jalalu keep changing the word, the days among us. So God created the whole universe in a very dynamic manner, from atoms to the galaxies. How can you believe that we come to this world without changing anything, living without any production and activity, then dying? This is a very passive notion of the world. I don't see it as Islamic. Islam gives us an insight to produce more. For example, Islamic message is against slavery in a sense. And normally, Muslims should have abolished slavery before Americans and English.
Right.
Why didn't they do that?
Yes.
Because of this orthodoxy, conservatism.
Yes.
Today, everyone accepts that abolition of slavery is a good thing. But why did we need to learn it from British? British even taught Ottomans, you have to abolish slavery. Isn't it embarrassing? Ottomans should have taught Britain that you should abolish slavery.
Right. And the printing press, the widely quoted example from Turkey. Now, you also have certain reservations about the Madrasa education, which is imparted these days. In India, we have a huge number of madrasas, so it is quite relevant in our context. You say that the general approach in madrasa education is individualistic and not institutionalized. It is more of tradition, whereas madrasa education should set aside redundant ideas and produce new Islamic perspectives. What, according to you, would be an ideal madrasa in today's world?
Thank you for this very important question. Both madrasa and waqfs are important Muslim institutions that Europeans learn about them, took and developed and made much better. Waqfs, for example, in our tradition, are very stable and fixed that cannot adapt changing conditions, whereas European wakufs and like endowment of Harvard and Princeton now in America, very dynamic models. That's why they've been much more successful. Same thing with pedagogical institutions. The university has two better forms. As you mentioned, one of them is that it's impersonal. You attend a university, get a degree for a subject. Whereas in Madrasa, you teach in the halaqah or the study of a personal teacher, and the person gave you ijazah, not on a subject, on a particular book, very specific. Then it is really having a hard time to adapt conditions to develop. And more importantly, its curriculum is very exclusionary. Yes. They have very narrow sense of Islamic law, fiqh, kalam, even kalam theology is undermined mostly. It is not as open as university education, not even comparable. Let me conclude with a sharp example from late 19th century, Muhammad Abduh, Egyptian reformist in Cairo.
Right.
And he is a traditional scholar with some reformist ideas. And he had a project of reforming the most well-known Sunni Madrasa, Al-Azhar, in Cairo. Then Al-Azhar, Council of Ulama, replied to him saying that, and his proposal was very humble, Abduh tried to include Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddimah and some Mu'tazili writings in the curriculum. We are not thinking about European philosophy or hard science.
Right.
And the ulama said that we will not let you to turn this holy institution into European university.
Very interesting.
So for them, university is a bad thing. This holy institution would never accept even Ibn Khaldun Muqaddimah. But again, today, a century after, now Al-Azhar is a university, first of all.
Of course.
But still, very narrow.
Very narrow, yes. Now this brings me to question that would you advocate re-enlightenment of Muslims of the era which happened during Al-Mamun, who was a caliph in the Abbasid period? Do you think, this is possible in today's world? Because it led to a lot of inquiry, the scientific temper, and so many innovations, discoveries, and upgradations. But it appears to be very difficult to bring such thoughts in today's time.
Thank you. This is a very challenging question because on the one hand, no historical experience can be fully replicated. We cannot take Ma'mun, Mu'tazili, and their understanding is something we can repeat today. Even at their time, there are problems because, yes, enlightened kings of Abbasi and Umayyad support science, which was important. But at the same time, when Ma'mun and Mu'tazili tried to force their views to ulama like Ibn Hanbal, it backfired. It made conservatives more popular. That show, in a small sense, even a rationalist ulama ally with the state create complications.
Right.
Today, in every society, I expect Muslims produce their new views of enlightenment.
Right.
So I am very optimistic about Muslim minorities in Europe, and North America. They can produce new ideas, but unfortunately, the fact is that rather than Muslims in the West having some influence in the Middle East, we see how Middle East shape Muslims in the West. This is a problem we have today.
Yes. Now, what are your views about positioning of women in Muslim societies, especially India? We have seen that all other religions, they have been able to now give the position to women which they deserve. And it has brought about a lot of changes in their society for good. But Muslims are lacking far behind in this area. And according to historical accounts, we know back in even the 7th century, they had a very good position. They had the respect of the society, and they were given an opportunity to work and become leaders. But this is not there in the Muslim society today. If you look at the larger picture, there are exceptions, but if you look at the larger population, for instance, in India, which is third largest population of Muslims in the world, Muslim women are not getting the position which they should be getting.
India definitely is an important country and largest Muslim population, I think, after Indonesia. But I came to learn more about it because I know very little. But overall, on the issue of women's rights, let's follow the example of slavery.
Right.
Because Islamic message was for egalitarianism. For certain condition of history, this was not clearly explained initially, but later on, Muslims should have had more progress on gender equality. Again, why are we hearing from Europeans and Americans telling Muslim societies the importance of gender equality? This should have been the opposite. Muslims should teach Europeans how important women's rights are. This is something we should to take seriously and engage and understand.
Right.
The whole perception should be changed. If we follow the important principle of justice, when a man, for example, say 3 times you are divorced to his wife, then he is able to, or he doesn't give the talaq completely, divorce. Women cannot get remarried, but men remarry. There are so many examples of injustices.
Right.
But Islam is a religion about justice. Even the simple examples show how Muslims should rethink many issues, including women's rights.
Now, what are your views about, ideologues like Sayyid Qutb and Maulana Maududi and others who advocate that the Sharia laws should replace the man-made laws? In today's world, how do we deal with the teachings of such ideologues?
So, as hopefully the Hindu readers will read my book's translation, the main argument is ulama-state alliance. But the Islamist ideologue of 20th century you mentioned went even beyond ulama-state alliance. They are more radical because the typical Ottoman ulama said that we have partnership with the Padishah, Sultan.
Right.
We are religion, he is state. But modern Islamist says we are both. Taliban now, or Khomeini, after Khomeini, Iran, ulama says we are both religion and state. And the first person, as an ideologue, said Hassan al-Banna, founder of Ikhwan al-Muslimin, Muslim Brothers, is al-Islam din wa dawla. This is more radical than medieval ulama-state alliance. And Maududi was very influential in a negative way over both Sayyid Qutb and Khomeini. Today, Saudi Arabia is trying to reform. Iran is in deep crisis. These ideologies did not help anyone to solve their problems. I think that's my answer to the first part, but you had a second part of the question. In addition to Islamist ideologues, you also had...
I was asking you that how do we deal with such, ideology which is still prevalent, which is there in the literature, in the books, which are still available for people to consume. How do we deal with such, extreme views which are, very exclusive,
Yeah. So we have to contextualize because the context these ideologues emerged in the first half of 20th century was a time of ideologies. Communism, fascism, capitalism, and they look and say, oh, why don't we produce, and whatever we have, Islam, and produce an Islamist ideology? For the 21st century Muslims, these are not really making any informative help, any contribution. We live in a different time now. We have artificial intelligence, we have technology, we have globalization and everything. And already tested and failed Islamist ideologies is not helping. We really need to look a better understanding on the issue of Sharia, for example. You said, if we take Sharia as God laws and then moral principles about justice, other principles coming from Esma-i Husna, God's beautiful names like Adil, Adala, justice, compassion, and then others, this is good. But if you turn Sharia to ulama's law, fiqh, about particular details of women's rights, about the man's authority and politics, this is not helpful at all, and you cannot produce democracy or a well-functioning state based on citizenship.
Right. In your book, you've argued that depicting Islam as a violent religion is inaccurate. You've also given references of Max Weber and others, Huntington. There is only a particular interpretation which gives a projection that there are elements of violence. And if you look at the historical perspective, that the ideas of that kind of jihad and all, they have become redundant now. Now we need to do ijtihad rather than jihad. What are your views about it?
As a Muslim American, I always face, since after 9/11, especially the issue of violence, terrorism. First of all, until 1980s, most terrorist groups were leftist ideological groups, Marxist, Leninist, or some right wings. But after 1980s, ideologies decline and religions becomes more and more important in every country. And in the Muslim world, certain young people embrace what we call jihadi Salafism as an ideology of many radical groups from Al-Qaeda to ISIS. And these jihadi Salafis had a very problematic notion of nasikh, which means abrogation. Sayyid Qutb also, in his very problematic, horrible book, Milestones, repeat this idea, that certain aspects of Islam have been annulled, abrogated, and the real core is a violent, aggressive jihad. So what are they saying, to simplify? In the Quran, there are over 140 verses about peace, compassion, patience, coexistence.
Right.
And these jihadi Salafis say that all of these words are deleted because of a single word called sword verse. And then sword verse about Muslims attacking pagans in Mecca in a particular context, particular history, particular reason.
Right.
And the next verse, in fact, abrogate the sword verse, saying that if they come to make you peace, make peace with them, even with pagans in Mecca. In this regard, and then the verse doesn't have sword in it, and the verse doesn't have sword, and the word sword does not exist in Quran at all.
Right.
So, but the fact that in order to produce a radical ideology, they have to delete 140 verses of the Quran, show how the Quran has a very strong emphasis on peaceful interpretations.
Absolutely. In India, the Muslim experience has been very different, just like the Hindu experience. When you see in the light of British colonialism and how they have become the colonial census categories, which has firmed up their religious identity over the period. There was the partition and thereafter. Indian Muslims, we know, constitute a big chunk of Muslims in the world, and they live in India. What would be your suggestions to Indian Muslims for a peaceful coexistence with the other communities, the Hindu communities and other communities in India?
As I said, I really think that this is a very important country with a major minority. Unfortunately, I know little, but I came here to learn more. My basic understanding as a minority myself in America, from a religious point of view,
Right.
is the importance of the concept of citizenship. So, as an American citizen, I have rights and duties, and I'm contributing to society. Of course, government should also treat me as equal. That now, under the second Trump administration, there are some concerns. But I respect my government to treat me as an equal citizen. But at the same time, I see myself, regardless of my religious or ethnic background, as a citizen to contribute society, fulfilling my duties, avoiding polarization, and the science and technology and education and intellectual life. This is what I do.
Right.
And this is the way for me to integrate, to be part, embrace, and in exchange, I'm embracing the whole society as a citizen.
Right. Of course, your book is a delight to read, and I've read your book, and we would recommend to all our viewers that they should read this book. This is absolutely an eye-opening account of the Muslim world, and there are also suggestions to the way forward. Now, Professor Kuru, I'd like to ask you that in how many languages your book has come out? We know that it has been printed worldwide,
Yeah.
and also, what was your thought of bringing out a Hindi edition?
So it starts with Indonesia. I see one of the most intellectual, dynamic Muslim majority countries on earth. Then we have Arabic, of course, 22 countries. Persian, I have very good interaction with Persian people and some newspapers there, despite the critique of ulama state alliance in the book. Then in the Muslim world, Malay and Bangla and Urdu edition recently came. In Europe, there's a very strong debate about the book, starting with Bosnian, then Dutch, and 2 months ago I was in France, and then a week ago I was in Vienna for the German edition of the book. So this is really a global debate, and without Hindi it will be missing.
Yes.
Of course, India is a leading country in the world, and I'm looking forward to interaction with both Muslim leaders, Hindu leaders, and leaders with other religious or non-religious backgrounds. Because what we discuss is about humanity, how to reach a prosperous, peaceful world, and then what the history tell us about the future.
Right, and of course, India, as you said, is doing really well, and we touch wood, we will be now leaving behind Germany as far as our economic growth is concerned, and very soon, inshallah, we'll be the third largest economy in the world.
Bravo.
So, and also, Professor Kuru, we wish you all the best for your book launch at the International Book Fair. And for our Hindi viewers also, you are coming up with this delight, which is highly enlightening. It was truly a pleasure talking to you. I was looking forward to this conversation for a long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.